Okay. I'm good to go. You good to go?
Yeah, good to go, brother.
Cool. What do you got? Give me something. Give me something here.
Regular season OHL is done on the weekend.
Yeah, that's
Playoffs
true.
start this week. It's exciting. A lot of kids are done hockey.
What do you got? You got Sioux?
Guelph Sioux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. OHL Cup's going on too.
OHL Cup's going on this week.
You know what? Actually, you know what I noticed? The O8s are playing both TPH and I don't know if it's Okinawa
Okanagan?
or Okanagan or Upper Canada College. One of those two is also in it. Who is it?
UCC.
UCC. They're both in the OHL Cup. There's the first, I believe that's the first academy presence.
TPH has been there.
Oh, they've been there before?
Yeah. Last 10 years, probably.
Interesting. So I've been paying attention to that. They blew out Sun County the other night. Yesterday. 7-0. You saw it? But anyways, did you ever go watch the OHL Cup? Have you ever seen any of those games?
No, I've never been to a live game. No,
I haven't either. Because, man, I'm so out of touch with the top-end minor hockey Ontario teams because when would I have been there in the last 15 years, right? It'd be cool to go see because they got the OHL drafts coming up a couple weeks. Do you know what day the draft?
I think it's April 12th.
April 12th.
I think so.
Yeah. So we'll have a couple guys from around here. I was talking to it's so funny that we were talking about this just before we started. It's funny to see what people say about which kids and how it's like just so speculative. Like everything is just nobody knows, man.
Give me something.
Okay, so this guy is gonna latest he'll go his 4th round.
Okay.
It's like how do you know? It's like how do you know, right? Or and maybe he knows. That's the thing. But it's like people talk, right? Or this guy maybe I think he's gonna go around 8th round. And these are from credible sources. It's not like just some dad talking. But at the same time, I'm just like, how do you put a mark? Like it's so hard. You know what I mean? It's so hard to put a mark on a guy.
That'd be a tough one tough age to scout because there's so many people you're looking at, so many teams. It's not like it's 15. You're looking at across the province, looking in the States, getting Euro drafts, everything. It's tough. Yeah.
Well,
and then you got to project like what will they be in 2, 3 years, 4 years. But what's really cool, so just watching the evolution of it. And you watch guys come in and they are not all guys obviously, but to see a pick that a defensive defenseman turn out to be a really good defensive defenseman or whatever after a year or two, you see their game progress. Something to be said about playing in the league and just a lot of people get really hung up on ice time, but it's not necessarily. I mean, you would rather play a lot. But, some guys, it's just you got to give them little doses of the drip method, right? And then they get out there and they just calm down and they start playing and getting comfortable at the higher level. Keep their game simple. See the coaches make corrections to them. All of a sudden, you see, okay, I see what this player might be. It's pretty amazing, really.
I know it really is, man. You're really taking a very, very educated guess. It's like gambling. I've talked about that before. It's interesting.
The other thing that's really cool to watch too is like when people in general watch hockey, they look at the high end guys, right? But when you look at the teams and they start plugging in that defensive defenseman, like I look at Guelph, for example, how they got some really, really tough, hard guys to play against, and it makes all the difference in the world in the playoffs, and and they become as important as the high end offensive guy. Right? It's pretty cool.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the PowerTech online membership program. If you've been listening to Andy and I wondering, hey, how are they able to get all this podcast content out there? Well, that's because of our members. For just $9.99 a month, you can get access to our online video library, including hundreds of videos of Coach Andy teaching, and have the option for consultation calls with Andy or myself to go over anything you need. We can cover training, nutrition, coaching, parenting, agents, the junior college hockey path, whatever's of interest to you. You'll also be able to participate in our popular Ask Me Anything episodes, have access to special discount codes, and be given priority for any PowerTech in-person camps or events. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, this is the best way to do it. Visit powertechhockey.ca/memberships or find the link in the description of this video to learn more. Yeah, well, I think it's funny because as kids get older, it gets so serious. Like we talk about this all the time, and I've been talking with some guys who have younger kids in the game, and it's funny that they kind of ask the same questions about that you would ask of older players. in terms of where they should play or what they should be doing to make sure that they're scouted or that they're seen or they get the most opportunity. So they're asking the same questions about their 9-year-old as the 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old, whatever. So I find that interesting, and how on the one hand you can see why that happens, because you're thinking, okay, the next step is to care this much, so why don't we just care a little earlier and try to get ahead. um, but that kind of goes to where I want to go with talking today, because I came across an article. Our coach, he's going to coach our 2010 AAA team this year. Kyle Mackrick is his name, and I might have him on the podcast coming up to talk about just coaching philosophy stuff. But he sent me a cool article about kind of talking about the early specialization thing, and we've talked about it a lot before. But I kind of want to revisit it too, because it seems to be just a particularly crazy time of year with tryouts and draft and all this stuff coming up.
Well, I'm just saying that I've had like 3 people book appointments for consultations about preparing for the summer. A summer plan, all this stuff, which is fine.
Yeah.
What to do next year and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's just timely, and I think it's kind of just like that snowball effect. Like somebody starts asking a question about it, and then somebody else starts thinking about it, and then everyone starts talking about it, and then it's just this runaway thing of making sure you're maximum prepared and have the maximum optimal plan and all of this stuff. And obviously, age appropriate is a key to making sure that you're on track. And kind of the article that I'm going to read today is talking about that early specialization thing and how you get too serious too soon, and that actually doesn't line up with future success. I talked about this in that book Range that I
was trying to remember the name of it.
Yeah, it was what's the author's name again? Outliers guy. What's his name?
Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. He's the author on that book, and it was talking about exactly this.
Isn't it someone else? Is it Epstein maybe?
Oh, is it David Epstein?
I don't know.
Now I got to check. Range.
I think we're both wrong.
Oh no, you're right. It's David Epstein. You're right. Yeah, not Malcolm Gladwell. It's David Epstein. So he was talking about this in various domains. It wasn't just sports, but he was talking it with chess players. He was talking about it with a whole bunch of different examples of how people who, by design, start from day one trying to be the best at a certain thing, it actually doesn't equal success in that thing necessarily to the highest level. You'll get really good, or you could be one of the elite, but there's this intangible factor that you can't just manufacture with a plan, and that's where a lot of people miss. And that's why you have to just relax to a degree, because there is always going to be a component of the kid's development where they end up that is not in your control as a parent, and as the kid too. Like as the kid, you might just be limited by something that you can't control. Maybe you're not going to be tall enough. Maybe you're not going to be fast enough. Maybe you only have so many fast twitch. Maybe whatever happens, like there's things that are going to keep you that you couldn't fix. If you tried 100%, did all of the optimal things, you just are limited by something that's not in your control. And that's a fact of what can happen with a lot of kids, right? So I say that not to be discouraging, but to maybe try to put people at ease, particularly parents, especially when they're early in the game. Like just chill, man. Just let them do the thing, So anything on that before I start kind of picking at this?
Well, that's like, I'll just kind of piggyback on that, is you don't know, right, when they're young. Like I was talking to my brother this morning. So it's not hockey now. So my nephew is a extremely, extremely, extremely good lacrosse player, and he's young, and he's getting some offers from the highest places. And he was talking. He goes, I was ignorant with this, like with lacrosse. He goes, I was ignorant with it. He goes, my kid liked to play. He played hockey, played football, played lacrosse, and just played like he's a perfect example of a kid that found what he really likes. And he's still not sure if lacrosse is his favorite thing because he loves football so much. I know that he doesn't love hockey as much. And, anytime I'd pop into their house, there's a football, there's a baseball, there's a lacrosse stick, and we're always throwing it nonstop. And I think that just by doing that, he has so many crossover skills, right? But the big thing with him, and so my brother, when he was taking him through lacrosse, he was getting like people saying, like coaches at the junior levels and stuff saying, hey, your kid's really good. He goes, is he? Like, what? So he saw like, okay, if you go to this camp, do this, this, and this, and my brother's like, it doesn't make sense, like because it just seems like. And he would ask me like, what do you think about it in hockey? I said, well, it's very similar to hockey. Is like, yeah, if let's say a pro team or a junior team has camps and they kind of lay out, this is how you're going to get to the highest level. It's like maybe, but the people that go are the ones that can afford it, or I don't want to say crazy enough to do it because that's not necessarily true because you want to practice and stuff, but the belief in like you said, manufacturing a player, there's all kinds of different factors. So, anyways, my nephew's got all these offers, and it's like, wow, I didn't know, and he doesn't really care. He does, but it's like he doesn't want to go too fast. But my brother goes like, all these things that were presented to me, he goes, and all these kids coming with the fancy camp jerseys and sticks and gloves and all this stuff, like in the lacrosse world. He goes, they're not even close. So one of the limiting factors is my nephew is tough, like tough. And when he plays, he has a ton of room. And then with all the stuff that he's done before, playing catch and running and football and all that stuff, he's got agility and he sees games because he's played so many different games and the sports just make sense to him. So he's in lacrosse and he never went nuts on it. He just happens to be really good. So like those limiting factors could be, going back to that could be, as you said, you might be just never big enough, never heavy enough, not fast enough, not tall enough, not tough enough, can't handle pressure when the pressure's on. And maybe with my nephew, that might be the thing with lacrosse is he just didn't care enough to worry about making it. Like it wasn't a focus. He just played all these sports and he happens to be really good at them and he's getting offers and he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I like it. And he's not going to lose sleep if he doesn't. It doesn't get at a higher level. So, but he's already signed somewhere. So
yeah, but I like that concept of there's certain limiting factors. Like I would think a way people think about this too, or you can think about it. Most people have experienced this with school to some degree, where there's a certain subject that's just like no, right? And for a lot of people, it can be math. You're kind of on either side of the math game. It's like math, you get it, it comes to you, you understand. Other people, it's like I don't get it. It's just and you can do as many hours tutoring. You can do as much extra homework. You can do as many word problems as you want. The math genius guy, you just aren't going to be that. You just won't be that, and there's no reason to believe that isn't also true in sports. There are just some things that you can't really control. But one thing I like about it's not even just with multi-sport. It's just multi-everything. Having different interests, exploring different things. There's so much that you can take and apply to different situations where just because you had a different experience, you can see it and apply either a thinking pattern, a thought pattern, a movement pattern to this situation that otherwise you wouldn't have had access to. And the reason I say that is because in hockey, for example, you're doing the same movements all the time. It's repetitive. It's very repetitive movement patterns. If you get into a situation where it maybe requires something a little bit different and you've never experienced that before, you won't have access to that tool. And you always talk about this with skills. Like you might drill something for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours just to do it for a split second, And if you come across a certain split second where you could have used this thing that you've never had access to because you didn't play baseball or soccer or football or get really interested in math or read books or do something else that isn't just hockey all the time, then you're not going to be able to use those things to apply to this situation in a new way. And that's the beauty of like the term diversity that people like to use. That is what makes that valuable, is when you have a huge array of tools from different experiences that you can now apply to a situation where it wouldn't necessarily be the conventional way of doing things. That's why that's a valuable thing to have. And one thing I've noticed with recruiting with the academy is people can get into this mindset that, okay, you guys are just doing hockey now. So you're telling me that my kid has to come here and all they're doing is hockey all the time. And for this exact reason, we have that multi-sport component built into the program, because like when you're 13 years old, how do you even know that you want to be a hockey player? Every kid will say
that's one of my limiting factors I left out.
Like every kid will say they want to be a hockey player, but they have never been exposed to what that means or what that lifestyle is like. if you a professional anything for that matter, not just a hockey player, but if it could be an electrician, a plumber, whatever. So if you've never been exposed to that lifestyle, or you've never been exposed to what it takes to do that thing, how are you in a position to say, yeah, I want to be this? And so what we do is we're taking a bit of that lifestyle, what it might look like, and saying, okay, if you think you want to be a hockey player, here it is. Here's something that is getting you closer to what it might look like with this lifestyle. But we're fully aware that how are you going to know when you're 13? So we're not going to lock you into just that one thing. You know, we're going to say, hey, yeah, you're doing this, but it's also very important that you start to get to know these subjects in school. It's also very important that you keep this multi-sport component, because there is more than just hockey. And what if you end up really liking something that isn't hockey? You still have opportunities for that in this environment, you know? And it's important that that remains core to the development of the kids at whatever age it is, because they might think, oh yeah, I want to be a hockey player. And then when they're, 15, they get their first part-time job, they get a little money in their pocket, and they're like, hey, I like this. This is nice, So that is really, really important. And that falls right in line with that. It's not, we say multi-sport, but it's multi-anything. It's just having a variety of inputs at all times so that you can actually have a well-developed perspective of life, and you can pick appropriately where you feel like you fit in to society as an adult, or you can at least guess on where you might want to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, for myself, like when I was done hockey, like I played a lot of sports growing up, and all those sports had an influence on my hockey, right? Like I played a ton of baseball, and like you can sit there, and baseball has nothing to do with hockey, but like if you start thinking about the things that you do, like your early development in sports is not about being the fastest, because it's not, you're not wired for that yet. What's it about? It's about having endurance. It's about aiming. It's about balance. I know that seems really basic, but if you have a really good foundation of balance and endurance and aiming, for example, those three things, then you can build on that foundation. But if you try to skip through that, then you just may never get it. But like if you start looking and you start digging deep, like when you're throwing a ball, right? Like there's the aiming aspect of it. There's, learning how your hips move. And then one thing that is just like if you're throwing hard or long or whatever, football, same thing. You just have that pivot foot where you end up on basically the toe, and you rotate your hips and you're following through with the aim. And is that a heck of a lot different than shooting a puck? No, you have a pivot foot where you're following through. So, and I know that you could sit there, yeah, but it's two different sports, and I get that, but like there's all these correlations. But it would be the same as boxing, right? If you're punching, if you're just flat-footed and you don't pivot the hips and turn the toe and all that stuff, you don't get everything into it. So it's like making that a natural movement in everything that you do. It's then all of a sudden sports become sports. You see a lot of kids that that they don't play hockey. You have to call it a hockey stance, where other athletes would be, it's like the athletic stance. Like, what does that mean, right? You're getting down, you hip hinge a little bit, you're down a little bit low, you're ready, you're active, you're ready on the balls of your feet, your toes, whatever you want to call it, nipples over toes, right? And it's like you're ready to go. So like being in that position all the time, you just learn, right? And like, so like, not to beat a dead horse here, but like playing all those sports when I was a kid, like we used to play a lot of tennis, a lot of basketball, like all the time playing sports. Racquetball we got into big time, and it was just like the agility in racquetball, the hand-eye coordination, you learn to be quick and stuff like that, and you strategize, right? And you can sit there, you're playing angles, right? You're playing the walls, all these different things, and those things do transfer into the game of hockey, believe it or not. Right. And you know what was so refreshing about doing that? Like, I think I told you this before, is when I was playing junior, we had workouts. Like a couple of my buddies, we'd go and we'd have our workouts. And then our reward after working out was playing squash or badminton. And if we didn't give it everything we had, which we usually did, or we'd lie to each other, we'd say, let's play racquetball now. The reason we wanted to do so much, it was so much fun, it was so much different, right? You're still competing in a different way, and you work your ass off in something different, which goes back to saying my biggest pet peeve right now is the kids. With the kids that I work with so often, is they're not refreshed. They're just like, okay, here's another, and it's not like, oh, here's another day of hockey. I don't mean it like that. It's just, it's another day of hockey. Whereas if they were, if you brought if they went to the rink and you surprised them with there's a squash court where that's what we're doing today, and they learn how to play squash, they might really, really enjoy that. Actually, they will, most likely. They get into it, and it's like refreshing, right?
Yeah, well, like all that stuff's. I'm not going to delay it anymore because you basically just hit on most of the things I'm going to touch on more or less. But what's cool about this article that I'm going to read is this is framed now from NHL players. So we talk about these concepts a lot, and we've talked about it with different things. But now I'm going to be taking it explicitly from the NHL, from these guys that are self-reporting about their childhood. And
Self-reporting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like we've directly asked the NHL players what it was like for their upbringing, and they're reporting what it is. So I got a couple different headings here, but I'm gonna read some of it. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between two things, but I'll read it, and then I just want to get kind of your input on what they're talking about here. Okay. So here's the start of the article. This was from USA Hockey. Michael Doyle was the author of this one article, and then there was another thing I'm going to touch on afterwards. So this is starting the article off. With the nonstop, heart-pounding action of the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's easy to be excited about hockey in the spring and early summer months. But when it comes to our own young hockey players, it's important to be cautious about too much ice time during the offseason. All athletes, including NHL players, need time away from the rink for a number of reasons, but children especially so. While they're taking a break from the ice, the best way to promote their hockey skills is by playing other sports and activities. Participating in a variety of sports enhances kids' overall athletic ability, which will make them better hockey players. Athletic development at any age is important, said Christian Koling. Don't know if I'm saying that right. USA Hockey's coach-in-chief for the Minnesota district. Specifically, if you look at the long-term athletic development phases. So we're going to touch on that in a second here. So I'm gonna flip over now to an NHL survey that they did among players. This was from Greg Revak. I'm not sure how to say that, but he put out a tweet relating to this article that I'm touching on. So these are just kind of some of the main hitters on that. Anything to say before I jump onto the stats here?
Nope.
Good.
I didn't know that the long-term development was in that article, but I already touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. So here's some of the kind of key hitters of it, and then we'll talk about it a bit, and then I'm going to go back to that article after. Okay. So this is from NHL players. Okay. This is what this report came from. So from ages 5 to 14, 98% of NHL players participated in a sport other than hockey.
So what was it, 5 to 14?
From ages 5 to 14. So 98% of them participated in another sport. So none of them are single sport from ages 5 to 14. More than half of them played soccer and or street roller hockey, which that's kind of a gray area for me. Baseball, 48%, golf, 43%, basketball, 28%, outdoor sports, 24%, tennis, 23%, football, 22%. That was the top 8 of the distribution of sports among that 98%. Here's kind of where it gets more interesting now. From ages 15 to 18, nearly 80% of the NHL players continued to participate in a sport other than hockey while also chasing their on-ice dream. Golf was 42%, which is the most heavily played sport that they stayed consistent with from early childhood, followed by street or roller hockey, again, gray area, 24%. Baseball, 20%. That's their top 3. Nearly 20% played soccer during the 15 to 18 age range, though this was the steepest drop-off from early childhood. So even from 15 to 18, when we talk about that as hockey crunch time, they said nearly 80% of NHL players still continue to play another sport. That would be organized sport, right? Not just they're playing recreational, okay? The average NHL player began skating and playing hockey after 4 years old and did not specialize, meaning they continued to participate regularly in other sports until after the age of 14. Though the age of specialization most often provided by players was 16. So around 16 is when they start to mainly focus on the one, but they still have elements of those other sports, even all the way up to 16, right? On average, the people most critical to the player's hockey development is their father, 86%, their mother, 68%, brother, 31%, coach, 23%, and grandparent, 13%. So that's just another kind of interesting stat on the way. So those are just some basic stats about what actual NHL players, current NHL players, and what they're following along. And this is pretty standard among what like normal kids are doing. They normally have a sport or two, they'll have a sport or two that they play in addition to hockey. So normally when I talk to kids about it, they're playing baseball, soccer. One of those two are popular in our area in the summertime. or in the off season, and a lot of them are pursuing that other sport seriously. Also, they're doing both. It's not until that kind of age we talk about, where it's 16-ish, 15, 16, where kids start to focus more heavily on the one sport. And I think even the only reason for that, like just flashing back to when I was a kid, I think it was 14, 15 for me when I started to go down just the hockey track. And I think it was more just like the logistics of it than anything. It's like just trying to get around to, because at the same time that hockey is ramping up in terms of commitment, all the other sports are also ramping up. So you can't really do both. So it was more like I was forced to choose one at that point, as opposed to I just didn't want to do that thing anymore. If I could have logistically kept up playing baseball, because I also play AAA baseball, I would have continued to do that, but it was just too much. Like you just don't have enough time.
Yeah, mom and dad are never home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So any kind of thoughts on that to start with, from in terms of the percentages, 98% from ages 5 to 14 playing another sport.
Well, I'll go with that one to start. I think that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Like if you talk to a lot of players, I don't want to say especially, but it seems from when I hear interviews or read things from U.S. and maybe even European. I'm not sure about that, but I know U.S. That makes sense with the model of how their sports is, right? Because a lot of things are high school centered, right? You might have AAA, but they have a lot of school sports. It's a lot different than it. Not saying Canadian schools don't have sports, but playing for your school and being the school athlete it seems to be a little bit more cool. I don't know if that's the word, to do that in the States. Like you're just brought up that way. You play for this school and you grow up that way. And I think that makes total sense that kids don't specialize in hockey yet. And then being 5 to 14, well, that just makes sense because like how, to our point earlier, how would you know if you're a hockey player or a baseball player? Like a child, I believe, like, and I can just look at my kids when they grew up, hockey was the best. And then lacrosse came and then lacrosse was the best. And it was like, they loved them both. And if you said pick one, yeah, like I know my youngest one would have said, well, if I have to pick one, I'll take hockey. But if I can play them all, I want to play them all. And it wasn't, if I could be a pro lacrosse player or just play lacrosse, like whatever you want to call it, that would have been, for sure he would have played until he couldn't anymore. But there came a point in this area where it was like, okay, like, and actually the biggest thing that we had to talk as a family was to it's like, we just can't travel every weekend. Like we just can't do it. That's what it was. We sat down and broke his heart, and it wasn't like you have to play hockey. It's, you have to pick one if we're going to go away during that season. So it was hockey for him. And so we said, let's pick up another sport. So he chose a couple other ones where it was not wasn't so time intensive and cost intensive, where we could stay at home on the weekends. It saved our lives, like just to be a family. But like, I could see that at 14, like he was a good player, but he didn't know. Like that was just, you're still talking about, I want to play in the NHL. Like that's just a bunch of words. Like no one knows. And or I want to be a pro NLL guy, or I want to be a wrestler or a boxer or whatever. So you're playing sports, and that's the thing. I think that a lot of that comes down to like, in how couldn't it? And maybe I sound ridiculous here, but how could it not come from the parents? Pushing one more than the other.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I think that up to 14, I think that of course you're playing sports, you're playing it for fun, and everyone has, most kids, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people that play, especially if they're decent, are thinking that, oh, I can go on and play at the highest level. Like I want to play in the OHL, I want to play in college. Well, that's not a ridiculous thing to say when you're 14, right? That's, you're a good player in your area, but you haven't really seen the big picture yet.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this, I think, like a layer deeper. What I want to talk about in a second, I'm going to touch on this. I'm going to touch on this long-term athletic development plan thing first, and then I'm going to go into the layer deeper about talking about positionless hockey and not even specializing in a position necessarily, which is kind of an interesting twist to it. So, back to this USA Hockey article. Parents and coaches should not be in a rush to specialize youngsters into hockey. They need a good base of athleticism above all else. What you're trying to do as a hockey coach in developing your athletes at the youngest ages, 6 to 9 years old, are basically agility, balance, and coordination. This is from that same coach, Coiling, I think his name is. Uh, and those things cross over to all sports. So they're the same thing you're trying to develop, whether it be baseball, tennis, lacrosse, or hockey. That's your fundamentals. That's your foundation. We talk about that all the time. These principles support the physical literacy, These principles support physical literacy, a key component to developing healthy, resilient, active children who can reach their full potential. So this is actually a danger of early specialization, is not adapting to all these different types of movements that you have to do. They don't understand their body yet. It's the funniest thing teaching kids how to do deadlifts. It's the funniest thing to watch because they have no sense of their spine. Like they have no concept of what it feels like, what it looks like. If I say to try to keep your back flat, they have no idea if they look like a fish hook or if they look like a piece of plywood. They have no idea. They can't tell. They haven't developed it, and that's core to moving everything. So before we even talk about a sport, they have to learn that awareness. And that's kind of what this thing is talking to or speaking to. USA Hockey's ADM technical director, Ken Martell, discusses the crossover benefits of multiple sports. He calls them donor sports. As a director of hockey operations at the University of Minnesota Duluth men's hockey team, who've won 3 NCAA national championships in the last decade, Coiling sees the overall athletic ability in the recruits coming to campus and the importance of well-rounded athletes. Most players that we see are in the mix for college hockey were multi-sport athletes. There comes a time in development when they get to be really serious at 15 or 16 and they start to focus on hockey. That becomes more of an issue with time and training being more intense. As a preteen and young teenager, it's important to participate in other sports, and that leads to the overall development path where you may be in a position to focus on a specific sport once you're in that recruiting age. Even when targeting sport-specific skills as kids get older, it's still important to take a break from hockey. So this is kind of going back to the too much ice thing that gets frustrating. Even those NHLers in the playoffs will take time. Even those NHLers in the playoffs will take time off after the postseason to enjoy different flavors. Year-round hockey for our young athletes is a recipe for disaster. Every summer, Coiling runs into a parent or two who have similar conversations. Youth go through the season and you talk to a parent and they say, we're going to this tournament and playing on that summer team. And the parent says, well, my kid wants to do it. I left it up to them and they want to play. Well, yeah, they'd have M&Ms for dinner every night if they wanted. Coaches should encourage players to take time off after the season, but they should also embolden parents to do the same. It's important for parents to be guardians to protect that time away. And even if kids say they want to play year-round, they don't need to be playing 12 months out of the year. 2 critical factors of ensuring our youth play different sports are overuse and burnout. We see a lot of overuse injuries in sports. For an athlete to only be focusing on one sport, and especially in hockey when you have the skating motion, there's certainly a risk of overuse. Taking that break is good for players physically, not to mention mentally. A team physician for USA Hockey who specializes in pediatric, adolescent, and collegiate sports medicine warns parents and coaches of 3 dangers associated with early specialization: physical injury, burnout, and mental health. So the next piece, I'm going to skip reading the next piece, but it's more or less talking about, it's pretty straightforward. Well, the mental health and having that hockey hunger that you talk about so much. And this goes back to what you always say with the too much ice thing. It's almost like they don't care anymore because it's just another skate. They're not excited to be there. And I had another talk with the group on Monday when we were skating. Just like, I'm trying to explain things to you guys that actually will help the game. It would actually help your game in real life. And it's just like you're messing around, cross-checking each other in line, not really paying attention. And I'm asking for like 35 minutes of focus, and it's not entirely their fault. It's just a lot of hockey, man. It's a lot of ice, and it's important that the people that are in charge, even if you're going to do a program like that, because there are positives to it, you have to understand and know that is kind of the results that are going to be coming your way so that you can remind them about this other stuff, or you can enforce the break, you can enforce the time off and all of that stuff, right? So anything to add on that?
No, I think it's just, it only makes sense that when you're expected to go hard every day, which is what they think or what coaches expect, right? It only makes sense that at some point you're just going to get tired of going hard or tired of being focused, right? So it just makes sense, like, from the mental standpoint, that more is not necessarily better. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah. So I was talking with Kyle again about kind of the team for next year and what the philosophy is going through that. And he's like super up to date with like current trends in coaching and what's popular at the NHL level and all this stuff. And it's not like this is brand new or anything, but he was talking about how everything is moving to like positionless hockey. So everyone needs to know how to play everywhere. So it's kind of like you're in your position when the puck drops, but then, and you basically kind of stay in the lines with that. But at all times of the game, guys should be able to shuffle in and out of positions just because the game moves so quickly. And so his philosophy, bringing it down to younger ages, which is kind of what we're going to be looking at doing next year, which makes sense for a multitude of reasons. But one is that positionless style where guys understand all positions of the game. And you've talked about this a million times with, you understand the mindset of a forward as a defenseman. That helps you be a better defenseman and vice versa. So I would just wanted to point out one thing in this article. They talked about a couple guys that had changed positions playing in the NHL, which is kind of interesting. So back to this is again another article. There's a ton of benefits to waiting to specialize in hockey, but once established as a hockey player, should youth players even specialize fully in one position? Notable examples of players who changed positions from forward to defense. Jake Gardner, he did this in his junior year of high school. Rasmus Dallin.
Yeah, I just heard an interview with him.
Yeah, the year prior to his draft. Andrei Markov, he was drafted as a center and switched to D after being drafted. Brent Burns switched early in his NHL career. Dustin Byfuglien in the middle of his career. Sergei Fedorov late in his NHL career. There are countless examples where players move between right wing, left wing, and center. Some do this multiple times during a season. Boone Jenner is an example where he played 5 to 6 years in the NHL as a winger before moving to the center position. Tage Thompson moved to center from wing and then broke out as an NHL star. The next little section here is from Scotty Bowman. So he's talking about this position thing or practicing positions. All-time coaching legend and Hockey Hall of Fame NHL coach Scotty Bowman would have all of his players play each position at practice. He holds the coaching record for most Stanley Cups and more than once switched players between forward and defense. So this is a quote now from Scotty Bowman. If you maneuver players around and don't pigeonhole them into a certain position at a young age, they're going to be able to find their niche a lot easier, and it's going to be pretty seamless. There's so much to learn by playing other positions. I tried goalie, and I can tell you for certain that I'm a much better scorer because of it. This isn't just older and old-time coaches. Hockey IQ podcast guest and current Montreal Canadiens head coach Martin St. Louis said the same thing. In practices, forwards and defensemen are often mixed together. Every player plays both offensive and defensive reps. So this is something that I started doing actually by accident this year with the U18s because we're short guys a lot. So we're doing drills like 2-on-1 regroups, 1-on-1 situations, 2-on-2s, whatever. And just for the sake of keeping the flow of practice going, it's like everybody play everywhere. So we'll divide up like 2 colors, white, red, and everybody does everything. I don't care who goes, just jump in and do it. So what are your kind of thoughts, I guess, about how you see the positionless thing at higher levels? And then on the flip side, how you see it as important with younger kids when they're developing on the way up.
Well, I see it as like when you were talking about guys that transition. I remember the Leafs back in the 80s, back when I played, there was Gary Leeman and Wendell Clark for Toronto. And Wendell was drafted first overall in the NHL as a defenseman. He played his NHL career as a forward, as a left winger, I believe it was. Leeman used to do both. It's not anything that's really rocket science. I think it shouldn't really be a shock, really, because hockey's hockey, right? You should be able to just play hockey. That's what an NHL player should be able to do. And then as you get older, your tendencies are going to lend maybe to a team at a certain position. So I think you should be able to play hockey, and it's not shocking to me. Like, you might be on the point on the power play or defending in your own end on a PK, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, you're not in one spot the whole time. So you have to learn. And then and at higher levels, when you're thinking the game a little bit more, I think it's great to do reps. Like if you're a forward playing D and realize that if you turn your toes a certain way, someone can beat you to the outside. Like, you can learn lessons from both sides of the puck, right? So, like, obviously, like, to me, that's just obvious. And I think you just make yourself a better player if you know how to defend. First of all, if you can skate both positions, that's really important. But, sorry, I think it's just important that if the coach needs you to play D, you can play D. If you can play forward, you play forward. Like it's not rocket science. But getting reps and practices and doing it over and over, it's critical. Like it actually is. You should be able to do it. Um, excuse me, I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, so that's why like when we have players that are younger and they don't work their backward skating at all. Well, what happens if you're on D, penalty killing and all that stuff? Like you have to do it. So it's simple. And then when you're playing the game at high level, low levels, doesn't matter. Like I said, you're not stuck in one position the whole game. You're not a right D and you never go past the center, halfway mark of the ice, right? The dot lines or whatever. You could be all over the place, and it's just a matter of reading and reacting to the game. So if you happen to be a defenseman and you're going on a 3-on-2 and you're the second guy, well, you're going to the net, right? So it's not like, no, I'm a defenseman, I stay back. So I mean, it's pretty simple. And then if you're a player, if you're the centerman and you're the fourth or fifth guy back, then you're playing D at this point until there's a switch. It's like common sense. Now younger, I think that's where it becomes. I think that's where it's so shocking right now is because people look at their kids and they're pigeonholed when they're young to be this position, and it doesn't even make any sense that someone is 9 years old and they're a centerman or a right wing, right D, whatever. It doesn't even make sense because it's just youth hockey, not just youth hockey. It's like to pigeonhole someone like that. You're actually, I think you're not developing.
Well, you've said this before, even with like some of your OHL guys, you'll have them on the ice and we got to do backward skating and they can't skate backwards.
Not well.
Yeah, right.
Not well. I had one guy played in the NHL for not very long, but like less than 30 games. But he went to a combine. He was like, they're doing these tests on backwards. We work on backwards. I said, well, I've been trying to get you to do it for 5 years, dude. And we can try. And it was ugly as hell. But how many times, you get injuries and stuff and someone's got to play D? Like it's a good thing to be versatile, right? But I think it's parents and, well, it would be coaches too that pigeonhole kids as, they have a chart that the tallest guys are D, the fastest guy is the centerman, the shittier skaters or the wingers or however it goes. And it's almost how people do it. But I think it's very important that everyone plays different positions but now it comes down to when you're developing players or you're coaching teams, is winning more important than developing the player, right? And that's fine if you want to win. That's your philosophy. That's fine. But I think it's important that kid has taken 5,000 face-offs in his life, so that if he gets to the OHL or college, when a guy gets kicked out of a draw, he can maybe win a face-off for you, or a defenseman even, right? Or if you get caught on a 1-on-1, or you're playing a 3-on-3 overtime, or 4-on-4 hockey and you're defending, you've been there before. It's important. To me, it's like almost stupid not to think that way.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of along those lines. I got one more quote I want to finish on, and then we can wrap it up. I don't know who this is from. It's like a graphic on the article, but it's a good quote. So, it says, "I let all youth teams play the same way, like the first team. I always put the emphasis on learning. Sometimes I had the suspicion the youth coaches were more concerned about winning. They cared about their own reputation. I cared only about the interest of the club. When a player with talent couldn't defend, I put him in defense so he could learn. But that could cost a point. But I didn't care. I was busy developing the player." So I think that little quote is kind of how I want to finish up for today, talking about the coaching philosophy behind it. And this is something that between you and I and Kyle at the academy is the philosophy we're bringing to the younger ages, where of course you want to win. Of course you want to be the most competitive, but developing kids that can play the game the right way and they can develop all of these skills is the most important thing if the goal is to have them move on to play at a better level one day. And so if that is the goal, and for us that is the goal, move them on to something better one day, then it's not about winning today. And that tail piece of that quote, "But I didn't care. I was busy developing the player." It could cost the team a point. That's crucial to be okay with as the coach or the person that's in the development role. Like if you lose the game, like what does it matter if you lose the game when they're 13 or 14 or whatever age? Because if the point is developing the player to move them on to somewhere better, then the long-term strategy has to be they have to learn how to play the game and play in all these different roles. And it's also a long-term strategy to be better equipped to win the game. Because what happens with Yeah, because with what happens with a lot of these really top end teams, or even just good teams, like there's a team around here they're a good team, but they're not actually a good team. They're a good 4 players, right? You take away one of the horses, or you play everyone with even ice time. It's a totally different team, And now, is that team really good? And all those players are they going to move on to be hockey players one day, or play at higher levels, or get the most they can out of hockey? No, probably the 3-4 guys that are getting all the ice time will end up getting some kind of opportunity in that sense, right? And that's just a fundamental coaching philosophy that if this matters to you, then you have to be willing to adopt that, and you have to bite the fact that you're not going to win every game.
Yeah, and you're going to listen to one parent or two that say this is stupid.
Oh, for sure.
Because my kid's a centerman, and you get that all the time.
Yeah, and even when we're talking to parents right now about the team for next year, it's I genuinely do not care if we have a super team. It's nice to have the best players. Like, that's great. If you can have that, then cool. But I'd much rather
it's better to have willing players, though.
That's what I was just gonna say. I'd much rather have the guys that want to be here. They're willing to be here. They want to get better. They want to learn. And we'll start off weaker, but I guarantee you, give it 6 months, give it 1 year, give it 2 years, and you're gonna have a team of guys that can compete with anybody on any day, because we're trying to go about developing kids the right way with respect to hockey. And then that says nothing about the other things that we're trying to do to develop them as people as well, And I think that has to be core as a coach. If that's not a core piece of your philosophy, then I don't think you're in it for the right reason necessarily. So that's kind of my summary from this, I guess, the specialization standpoint that we're talking about, or specializing early and then tailoring that into, as the adults that are in charge, how you can make that actionable. It's like you have to understand these things and value them as core to your philosophy. Otherwise, you're not going to accomplish the goal that you should be, I think, aiming to accomplish as a coach, which is develop the players the best you can and give them the most opportunity they can to get the maximum amount they can out of hockey or fill in X activity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I was saying to you earlier, like, if you want to see a bunch of kids get excited, take your hockey team. And a lot of coaches will do this when you're beating someone or losing badly. They'll say they'll pick maybe 4 forwards to go on D and put the forwards up at forward, and kids get right excited, right? Like, there's your answer right there. And at that, like you said, at a certain age, it doesn't matter. Like, it's good for them, And when I talk to scouts and stuff like that, especially like I had one of my friends who's scouts, and he was talking to one of the boys that were scratched the other day, introduced him, and the player was asking, how do I make my game better? So this guy was a forward, power forward, and he just started picking apart how he can be a better D, scanning the ice, make it like when you're going to retrieve a puck, your first step, take a look, like, do your shoulder check and know where that puck's going now. And he gave him like 4 or 5 things to work on, and it was like he was a forward. He knew D inside out. And he knew D inside out because he had to compete against D inside all the time, and he probably played some D as well. It's really important to play all these positions. And for me, the last thing would be, I think what gets lost in sports, maybe in general, but like I know hockey, I think I do. But what gets lost in hockey is with I was a parent and I was a coach, so I understand both sides, right? Is you do want to win, and sometimes in coaching you don't want to piss people off, and you want your kid to be, if he's one of the goal scorers on the team, you want him to score. If he's a defenseman, you want him to, whatever, all the things you want him to excel at. And if you focus on that so much, and you want, whatever your results are or metrics that you're measuring to say you had a good game, it's all good. It's fine. But at the end of the day, if you happen to move on, right, and you thought you were a goal scorer, and I was just watching someone, I'll tell you after, and this kid was supposed to be like a star, and he's not a star anymore because he's not the goal scorer they thought he was going to be, and he can't play both sides of the puck, and it's just like he's vanilla out there. And when you get to the OHL, CHL, college, pro, they'll identify what you are, and then it just becomes a job. So you're a right D, and you thought you were maybe a skilled guy, and all of a sudden, no, you're a shutdown guy, and you have to learn it. Now it's your job, and it becomes tedious, and now you're working on that real specialization of your position, and it really doesn't happen until you get to that level. And there'll be some people that watch this or say, "Well, I coach a midget team, and my right D knows exactly what to do as a shutdown D or power play specialist." It's like fine, but most cases, no. It's the next level where you're really going to learn that stuff and where it's actually appropriate, because now people's jobs are on the line. You're trying to get a job at higher levels of hockey. Your school's getting paid for, whatever those things are. Now you're earning the right to be on the ice, right? So it's like, it's still a ton of fun, but it's more job mentality with a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I think the key takeaway on that, just from what you said, is the tendency to just over professionalize the younger age groups, where you're trying to take your whatever level team and treat them like they're a junior team, or treat them like they're a pro team in terms of how you're running the bench or your philosophy as a coach. And some people think or they'll present that like that's better. And I think there's elements of it that are good, but yeah, but there should be, above all else, should still be the development part of it. Development meaning get the kids to understand as much of the game as they possibly can in a variety of ways, so that when they get to that higher level, they're able to handle whatever the expectation ends up being on them. Because to your exact point, if you're my, U15 AAA goal scorer, you might not be when you're year one in the OHL or year one junior A or year one NCAA. And if you can't adapt because you haven't been developed in those other areas, then maybe you would have been a hockey player had you been developed in those other areas. But now you can't, because all you know how to do is score, and you're not good enough at it at this level.
Yeah, or you're not good enough when the game's 2-1 or 3-1, and we're just trying to lock down a game and play a 1-3-1 or a 1-2-2, and the only thing I care about as a coach is that puck gets outside of our blue line and you block every shot and you keep pucks out. Yeah. If your tendency is just to try to score, it's like you're going against it's not hockey. Yeah. The way it's designed at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the kind of two elements, take away two elements that I have is, one is that early specialization in terms of the sport. And then the second is specializing just in a certain position. That was kind of why I wanted to talk about this stuff today, because those two things can get lost really easily. And I think when you say, most reasonable people, when we say this stuff, they would agree. But it's just kind of like, oh yeah, true. Giving them the reminder, because maybe you're caught up for the moment. And so hopefully people kind of find that helpful. Anything else you got?
I think I'm good.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Good to go.
Okay, beautiful. See you guys next week.
Okay, thanks a lot.